left is a good thing, and I'm serious. With me right now is one of the few fighting for our past, to hold on to it, to study it, and not destroy it. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, military veteran, Ivy League grad. Senator, welcome back.
Hey, Brian, good to be on with you.
Senator, are you surprised that you're kind of along with Senator Mike Lee, in this quest to push back?
Well, I can tell you the American people are behind us. They strongly disapprove of the kind of mob rule we've seen on the streets. It doesn't matter what the statue is or where it is, Brian. There can be no tolerance whatsoever for the destruction of public or private property, for the kind of mob violence we've seen on the streets, in which police forces stand idly by, presumably ordered by left-wing mayors, and let rioters tear down or deface statues. That has to stop, and it has to stop now. And if local authorities will not do their job in imposing consequences on these rioters, then the Department of Justice needs to take every step possible under federal law to ensure that they face legal consequences.
Why is there a reluctance to do so? Not from the president. He made that clear yesterday, an executive order to, here it is, cut 3.
And now we've enacted an act, a very specific statue and monument act that puts people in jail for 10 years if they do anything to even try to deface one of our monuments or statues. So we have numerous people in prison right now. Others are going there.
And that's basically what he's going to do. We have video of these guys and these women.
Yeah,
so
Brian,
let's go after them.
These are not criminal masterminds. They film themselves and post it on social media. I'm watching right now on Fox News. They've got footage of the rioters who tried to tear down the statue of Andrew Jackson Monday afternoon in Lafayette Park. There cannot be a more clear-cut, more open and shut, cut-and-dry violation of the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act. I discussed this with the president on Monday night after those rioters tried to tear down the statue. It is Andrew Jackson on horseback in a military uniform on federal property. That law says up to 10 years in prison for doing so. Any person who participated in it needs to be charged by the Department of Justice. In other instances, it may require something like the Federal Anti-Riot Act or other laws, but if local authorities will not do their job, then the Department of Justice needs to ensure that we uphold the rule of law in our streets.
So do you make a dissemination between Confederate statues and our founding fathers, or Francis Scott Key?
Well, of course, I esteem our founding fathers and Abraham Lincoln and U.S. Grant above all else. But that's not really the question here, Brian. The question is whether we're going to tolerate mob rule or demand the rule of law. It is one thing if a local community decides that they want to honor a different person or people for different reasons. It is an entirely different thing to allow rioters, vigilantes, and mobs to go out and tear down public property. That cannot be tolerated in our society.
So Governor Andrew Cuomo, who said Columbus stays, don't leave Columbus alone, it means a lot to the Italian people, said this yesterday, cut 6.
People are making a statement about equality, about community, to be against racism, against slavery. I think those are good statements, and it depends, can you overdo it? Of course you can. But in New York, I don't think we've overdone it, and I think it's a healthy expression of people saying, let's get some priorities here, and let's remember the sin and mistake that this nation made, and let's not celebrate it.
Where's he wrong?
He is wrong that it's ever healthy to permit mobs to rule in our society. Making statements about things like equality and justice or opposition to racism, of course we should all support those things. It is not a statement when mobs are pulling down statues willy-nilly in the streets. It is a crime, and it needs to be treated as a crime. Even more so, it needs to be stopped. And if Andrew Cuomo is willing to defend to the last hour the statue of Christopher Columbus in Columbus Square in New York City, then I would applaud him, because no statue should be pulled down by mobs in the streets.
Exactly.
But to say that it's a healthy thing to make a quote unquote statement by defacing or tearing down a statue is antithetical to everything that the rule of law stands for.
It's almost a reverse patriotism. I'm used to people thinking, when I grew up, people think the problem was with Americans. They think they're the only ones with a history. They think they're the best country in the world. We had this swagger that made us kind of ridiculed when we traveled. And Americans had this attitude like they were the center of the world. We not only lost our swagger, we're apologizing for being American.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah, Brian, when people are tearing down statues of George Washington and U.S. Grant, it's not about the Civil War. It's because they hate America. It's because they uphold the premise of that execrable effort by the New York Times, the 1619 Project, revisionist anti-American history that says at its core America is a rotten, fundamentally irredeemable nation, which I and you reject wholeheartedly. America is the noblest nation in the history of mankind, which has always struggled passionately, tirelessly, relentlessly, although imperfectly, to uphold our founding creed that all men are created equal. It is one thing to recognize that America has always struggled to try to improve and build a more perfect union, as the preamble to our Constitution says. It is another thing to say that America is a fundamentally irredeemable nation.
And what do you say to African Americans listening right now who say, well, wait a second, that's because Brian Kilmeade and Tom Cotton don't have ancestry that dates back to slavery. It's easy for us to say that. What do you say to African Americans listening right now?
I say that I understand a lot of the frustrations that they see in our society. We still don't do a good enough job delivering public safety to African American neighborhoods. We are failing African American children in our public school system. But I would submit that most African Americans would like to see more and more effective policing in their communities. They don't want to see us defunding the police. They would like us to both grapple with our history, but also celebrate the fact that we have come so far in building that more perfect union and in living up to our founding creed. That there is no place in America no place in the world more so than America, where someone can have a fair shot and an open field, irrespective of that person's race or color or sex or background.
Talking to Senator Tom Cotton now. Senator, looking at Frederick Douglass, this extraordinary man who became one of the most famous men in the world during his time, and today his book on his life was Book of the Year last year. He learned, even though he had to escape slavery, teach himself to read and write, and became this great writer-speaker, he found out right before the war, he goes, I agree that America is falling short because we're not living up to our Constitution. It's not that our Constitution is bad, is that we're not living up to it. And what has to be fixed is this thing called amendments, and we did it, and we'll continue to do it. It was this body of work that continues to be improved, and I just don't see people wanting to make the country better by trying to destroy Andrew Jackson or take Lincoln's Emancipation statue, which was financed by freed slaves, down from a park, and think that's progress. I want to switch gears a little bit. When it comes to law enforcement, Democrats are now saying, we never said defund the police. We never said we're anti-policing. We just think, maybe we want to reform some things about it. And then all of a sudden you have Black Lives Matter basically chanting that. And then you have this mayor from Oakland, Libby Schaaf. I don't think there's a gray area here. Cut 13.
We are excited, as many cities are, to reimagine public safety. And that means not just to reform the police, but to replace the police with more trauma-informed and care-based, community-led responses that really don't warrant a badge and a gun.
Okay. So we have people who want to send cops in the streets who aren't cops, who are trauma-informed and care-based, to stop the next gang member with a bazooka. What is wrong? I mean, can you as a Democrat run from this mayor who sounds a lot like the mayor that gave up Seattle, who sounds a lot like the mayor in New York that took $140 million out of the budget, and a lot out of the mayor from Minneapolis who wants to take and has already taken money away from the Minneapolis budget?
Yeah, Brian, and I suspect what all those mayors have in common is that they have police security details to protect them from the terrible consequences of their decisions. Who doesn't have that protection? It's their own citizens, especially in most cases, they're lower income citizens. They're citizens that live in high crime neighborhoods. When you cut funding from the police, inevitably you're going to have less policing, which means more crime. You're also going to have less training, because that's one of the places where police departments will cut most quickly so they can preserve the force. And less training means that you're more likely to have encounters between police and citizens that result in the use of force. The exact opposite. We should be doing the exact opposite, which is giving more funding to our police so they have more resources like body cameras or de-escalation technique training. We shouldn't be cutting funding. But as you say, in Seattle, in Minneapolis, in Los Angeles, and New York, the Democratic Party now stands for defunding the police. And Joe Biden can say that he opposes it all he wants, but for 50 years, Joe Biden has done nothing but blown with the wind of Democratic Party politics, and he will do it again if he's elected president. He will focus on defunding the police and letting the mob rule in the streets.
Yeah, and real quick, legislation. How come you guys didn't deal the Democrats in when you were hatching it when it comes to law enforcement reform?
So I believe that Tim Scott, who led this working group that we had on police reform over the last week, has in fact been in touch with Democrats. And they outlined some of their objections yesterday, Brian. That's fine. They're entitled to disagree with Tim's bill on the merits. But all they have to do is turn the letter that they sent to Tim into an amendment and propose that amendment on the floor. Remember, today we're not voting on passage of a bill that's going to go to the president for his signature. We're only voting to start debate on a bill. And if they want to change the bill, you got to be able to debate it. You got to be able to propose an amendment. The Democrats are showing that they don't want a solution. They want an issue. Well, if they want the issue in this election to be defunding the police and mob rule, I would welcome that.
Senator Tom Cotton, thanks so much, Senator. Hey, listen, thanks for taking a stand on this. You have a lot to do, and there's not many people out there with you. I said that this morning, and I find it astounding, but I continue to be amazed on a daily basis. Senator, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, Mark Morgan.